There's been another school shooting, and it happened in Arlington, Texas. There are more details coming out, waiting for more details, but I do want to say this, and I know some folks might get mad that I'm saying this, but I don't care. As of September 1st in Texas, you can possess a weapon with no license. And I think it's important to say that because we don't know how this appears to be a student at this school got this weapon. We don't know what the weapon was, exactly what kind of gun it was, rather. But in Texas, and I heard this, I was thinking it, and I saw it on MSNBC, a former FBI agent saying, this is important. Because what's important is how they get access. Allegedly, 4 people have been injured, 3 hospitalized, 1 declined treatment. Police believe the incident began with 2 students in a classroom. The suspect has been identified as 18-year-old Timothy George Simpkins, who appears to be Black American, and he is currently on the run, and he is armed and dangerous. Again, this happened in Arlington, Texas. Sad story. Deja vu, obviously. And since this, I mean, again, don't know if there's a connection with this law on September 1st, but I think we can all say being in a state where you can possess a weapon with no license, that might even bring more shootings, not even a mass shooting. This could bring more shootings and more violence. So if you have family in Arlington, Texas, just be aware this young man, the suspect, is reportedly on the run. And my condolences go to the 4 people who are injured. I don't know if anybody has passed away yet, but I wish them a speedy and healthy recovery. Amisha, your thoughts?
You're right. And the hard part about reporting on something like this is that it's actually still in motion, where you know that there are still several facts and details that are coming out by the minute. There's still a lockdown in the area. There have been cell phone videos from students who were in the school at the time, audio clips and things like that are slowly pouring themselves out over cable news networks at this point. But there is not a lot of hardcore facts other than what we just heard Clay say in regards to there being an altercation between a couple of students and one of them having a weapon. I think that we do have to pay attention to the fact that weapons have become so much more easily accessible across the state of Texas, which I would argue was a completely ignorant policy decision, considering that violent crime and gun violence has gone up so dramatically over the past couple years, but specifically with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we're going to hear more from Republicans. You know, this is obviously a Republican state, Texas, Arlington, very Republican centric. We're going to hear time and time again the thoughts and prayers. I can think about those echoes right now. Same thing we hear every time there is a school shooting. But honestly, we have to do something about our guns and the easy level of access to them that way too many people have, be it whether they're young people in schools or individuals in street gangs. There's something that has to be done at the federal level to eradicate the use of these weapons and the accessibility of them.
And, you know, listen, you're from Chicago, I'm from Philly, and people act like we don't care about violence in our own communities. I do. When I think of guns, I've said it before, I'll say it again. I grew up around gun culture. It wasn't hunting. It wasn't going to a shooting range, but it was bullets outside of my window. It was running for my life when there was a shooting in a crowd. I heard guns pretty much every day in West Philadelphia in the 80s and 90s. And I grew up around gun culture. So a different kind of gun culture, maybe not the gun culture in Arizona or in Texas or in the South, but I have always cared about violence in my community. And what's heartbreaking is that even in states where they have strict gun laws, the guns are being sold across state lines via straw gun purchases. So, and I know you care about violence in your community, and you've spoken about it. You've spoken about the current mayor not doing enough in Chicago. So we care about these things. And guns, it's a contagion. So if you have all these weapons of war, don't know which weapon this alleged suspect had, but when you have it in Texas, it's going to spill over to Illinois It's going to spill over to Pennsylvania. It's going to spill over to New York, where you have very strict gun laws. These things are going to happen. So the more access we have to guns, it will create more gun violence. And as much as the crime reform bill had a lot of issues, the 94 crime reform bill, the one had two big things, two great things: the Violence Against Women Act, and it also had the ban on assault weapons. And that expired in 2004 under President Bush, rather. So yeah, we care about these things greatly. We've spoke about gun violence in various cities, but hey, folks want their God and guns. Go ahead, Amisha.
And I think everybody in the inner city, to your point, Clay, cares about gun violence, particularly because it is not episodic. For those of us who are from an inner city, it is not every few months there's a school shooting or something like that. Not to diminish the weight and the breadth of people who lose loved ones in school shootings. But I think that in comparison to a Detroit, to a Chicago, to a Memphis, to New York, even to some of our larger cities, to Philly, when you have gun violence that happens in your community every single day, multiple times a day, where you get used to hearing the gunshots, where it becomes kind of a point of regular, you hear them just as much as you hear birds sing. It is normalized to a certain extent for our young people, for our kids who have to live in those communities, but also to those who are basically, for economic reasons and other reasons, stuck within that cycle. And it is not talked about in the news media with the same level of empathy, care, and concern as some of what we see when these mass shootings happen on school campuses, or largely in areas of focus that don't have the predominant population be Black or brown. So I think that when folks say that you don't care, or the expectation is, why aren't you out here marching in the streets? I've lived in Chicago for a very long time. I can tell you there are moms protesting in the streets day in and day out. There are people at the mayor's offices, at city council meetings. There are folks coming down to Springfield, the state of Illinois, at the Capitol, arguing for better safety measures, arguing to end the practice of other states being allowed to bring guns in and sell them to the people in the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois, just because we are the state that has the strictest gun laws in the country. However, the surrounding Midwestern states do not, and most of the guns are trafficked in from other places. I think that there has to be an understanding that just because something happens regularly does not mean that it is okay, or that the individuals who live in those communities have basically just thrown their hands up, because they have not. They're fighting every single day. The refrain that bothers me the most is people acting as though those of us who live in those communities either don't care or aren't doing enough.
And you used a really good word there, that it's not episodic for these communities, right? It's not just a shocker and it's headline news. It's not. It's daily. And sadly, when things are daily and when you have people protesting or speaking out daily, that may not make it on your local news station. Exactly. So I always want to make sure I stress that, because they, some of these people, what about so-and-so, about Black on Black crime? And you know how much I hate that, because there's you never hear about what the amount of white on white crime is out of this world. White folks are killing each other. I always say this: if you watch that channel, Investigation Discovery, it is 24 hours of white folks burying somebody in their backyard. Evil lives here, fear thy neighbor, whatever. But they never say that for other. They never talk about Dominican on Dominican crime, or Latin on Latin crime, or Italian on Italian crime. The freaking Italian mafia profiting millions of dollars in major cities all over the country. But whatever. So I always want to point out, we do care about these issues. We have enough nuance and understanding that these issues are really important. And so I just want to say to anybody affected by this shooting, I hope you're okay. And sadly, I'd love to see things change politically, but that's not going to change, because we got some good folks in Texas who wanted a certain kind of way, and they're not going to change that, regardless of who's being harmed.